The night she pushed my hand away and hissed, "Don't touch me," burned into me like a brand. I stood there in the hallway, stunned by the coldness in her voice, feeling the walls of our home close in. Instead of shouting or pleading, I walked out quietly. No slamming doors, no spectacle. Silence, I decided, would be my first weapon. I checked into a cheap hotel and let the silence work on me. In the gray light of morning, clarity arrived. I remembered the little lies, the hidden messages, the late returns, the unexplained receipts. Trust had been chipped away like paint from an old door. Tonight I would stop pretending I didn't notice. Back home before dawn, I moved without drama. I took her phone from the nightstand, opened it, and read the proof with my hands steady. Flirty messages, private photos, reservations under another name, everything I suspected was there, spelled out in her own words. I didn't rage. I photographed, copied, and saved everything. Evidence, I decided, would be my second weapon. When she woke and saw me at the kitchen table, calm as a judge, the color drained from her face. She lunged for the phone, stammering excuses about friends and work, but I only handed her back the device and said nothing. Words were useless now. Her own messages had stripped her of the right to explanation. I poured coffee and let the steam hide the tremor in my hands. I didn't leave immediately. Instead, I began crafting a plan that would make her betrayal visible to everyone she used to hide behind. First, I printed everything, texts, pictures, booking confirmations, and organized them chronologically. I wanted the story to be undeniable, clean, and brutal in the way truth often is. This was not about cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was about making the consequences unavoidable. Next, I contacted the people who mattered, her closest friends, a few relatives who had grown suspicious, and the woman who'd once been my wife's confidant. I approached each conversation with restraint, handing over copies of messages and letting their shock fill the gaps words couldn't. Some tried to defend her, some were silent, most of them stepped back and watched the facade crumble. I also knew reputation was a currency she valued. Her job was public-facing, built on trust and a carefully curated life. Quietly, I emailed her supervisor and HR, proof attached, explaining that a conflict of interest and deception had been taking place and providing the dates and evidence. I didn't smear her with lies. I simply presented what she had written herself. Let policies and professional standards do what anger could not. Word spread. It moved differently than gossip. It moved like a stone dropped into still water, ripples touching places she hadn't expected. Calls came, messages came, people came to ask questions she couldn't answer without incriminating herself further. In rooms where she had once been the center, uncomfortable silences began to replace laughter. Her friend's defense crumbled under the weight of her own words. She tried to fight back, shouting, pleading, promising to change, but the momentum had turned. Her apologies felt staged, rehearsed lines meant to salvage what remained. I stayed composed. I refused to be drawn into a scene that would only validate her attempts at manipulation. My quiet had become an arena where her acts were revealed by light rather than by noise. Then came the hardest cut. I shared a carefully composed message, with redacted private details but the incriminating essentials, to my own circle, family, mutual friends, and a few people in her industry who needed to know. I didn't post anything on social media yet. This was surgical, targeted exposure. The purpose wasn't to humiliate for strangers' entertainment, but to ensure her life, professional and personal, bore the consequences. The day her company called her into HR was the day I saw real fear in her eyes. She tried to explain, to play innocent, but the documents spoke loudest. She was suspended pending investigation. The same colleagues who'd once toasted her successes now kept their distance. The life she had curated in careful layers of charm and omission began to collapse in public view. Neighbors, family acquaintances, even old school friends received messages quietly, not to shame but to be truthful and to prevent further deceit. The web she'd woven to protect her secret unraveled thread by thread. Her lover vanished the moment heat approached. He folded under exposure and never answered her calls. She was left standing in the wreckage she'd made. I took legal advice next. Custody of our shared assets and the house, where her infidelity was relevant to claims of trust and responsibility, had to be addressed. I was measured in my approach. No theatrical demands, only firm steps to secure what was fair and to make sure she could not use deception as leverage. The documents were signed, sealed, and delivered. Consequences, I had promised myself, would be proportional and inescapable. On a chilly Saturday morning I placed a thick envelope on the table in front of her, divorce papers, an itemized list of evidence, and a short letter. I did not gloat. My letter explained simply, "You told me not to touch me, so I walked away." Then I added that she had chosen to betray the vows and that the next part of her life would be honest, if only because the truth had been made unavoidable. I left the room before she could respond. She tried to salvage public sympathy, posting a vague, carefully worded message about personal struggles on social media, but the networks that mattered, professional forums, mutual circles, already knew the truth. Silence grew around her like ice. People who had once sought her company now avoided events where she might appear. The little lies that had been her armor turned into visible scars. In the end, the revenge I sought wasn't blood or spectacle. It was exposure, accountability, and the stripping away of the comfortable lies she'd built her life upon. I wanted her to understand the cost of treating love like a disposable convenience. Watching her face the fallout, career setbacks, lost friendships, the humiliation of being confronted by people she had deceived, was the bitter justice I allowed myself. As I walked away for good, lighter for the truth finally being out, I felt no triumph in her pain. What I felt was relief and a quiet, fierce clarity. Betrayal had consequences, and sometimes the clean, methodical reveal of truth is the most cutting revenge of all.